Protesting on the streets, another gone from the shooting of police. Tales from both sides are glorified. No justice for the deceased. Hope for the future fell out of reach. Orchestrated by the commander-in-chief. In between an elephant and jackass. Both need to be on a leash, but that's tongue-in-cheek for the way that I'm feeling. Love America, but they hate the way that I'm kneeling. Treated worse than a history of raping and pillage. Same wounds open up due to racial indifference. We gotta face it, can't be dismissive. That's why I'm just rapping like it's you and me. I pledge allegiance to the flag, but there's no YO in front of unity.
Good morning. Hello, my name is Robert Sellers, and I'm the Vice Provost for Equity and Inclusion and Chief Diversity Officer here at the University of Michigan. Welcome to our 2020 Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Summit and Community Assembly. Before we go any further, it's important that we officially acknowledge the peoples whose land we live and learn. The University of Michigan acknowledges the university's origins in a land grant from the Anishinaabe, including the Ottawa, the Ojibwe, and Potawatomi peoples, as well as the Wyandot. And we further acknowledge that our university stands, like almost all property in the United States, on lands obtained generally in unconscionable ways from indigenous peoples. Knowing where we are changes neither the past nor the present. However, through scholarship and pedagogy, we work to create a future in which the past is thoroughly understood and the present supports human flourishing and justice while enacting an ethic of care and compassion. The theme for this year's DEI Summit is Arts plus Social Change, Building an Anti-Racist World Through the Arts. Owing to the COVID-19 pandemic, today's assembly will be an all-virtual experience. In the spirit of making the most out of a tragic situation, we've endeavored to spotlight the wealth of talent that resides within our university community. Leading up to today's events, we put out a call for creative contributions, inviting members of the U of M community to submit their artwork and creative projects that align with our summit theme. We received a number of submissions that are now available for you to view on our summit website, deisummit.umich.edu. Throughout our program today, we are pleased to highlight some of these creative contributions, such as the one that opened our event today. You heard a clip of a song called History of Today by King Micah the Infamous, also known as Michael Bryant, who is a staff member in Health Information and Technology Services here at the University of Michigan. This song was paired with a series of photographs taken at Detroit's Black Lives Matter protests by Kevin McCauley, a U of M medical student. Both the song and the photography are amazing, as is the rest of today's program. So let's move on with this morning's program. It's my great pleasure to introduce our president to provide us with some opening remarks. Mark S. Schlissel is the 14th president of the University of Michigan. Throughout his 6+ year tenure as president, Mark has consistently demonstrated a personal commitment to making the university as diverse, equitable, and inclusive as possible. His commitment is perhaps most visible in his leadership in the university's 5-year DEI strategic plan. However, I've witnessed this commitment firsthand on almost a daily basis in numerous decisions he's made, both big and small. I can think of no better person to start off this morning program. So I present to you President Mark S. Schlissel.
Hi, Rob. Thank you very much, and good morning, everybody. And thanks for that very kind introduction, Rob. Also, a shout out to the various artists, our students, who contributed materials for that fantastic introduction. It really is a great statement of the power of the arts in alignment with our efforts around social justice and equity. I also want to thank everyone who's helped us reach this point in our work to enhance diversity, equity, and inclusion across the University of Michigan. The DEI leads in our units, the many advocates in our community, and the thousands of students, faculty, and staff who've embraced our commitment to DEI and pushed us to be better as a university. The difficulties and tragedies of the past few months re-emphasize the enormous challenges we must confront. The lives of Black people, such as George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and others, lost to unjust killings by law enforcement. The harms of the COVID-19 pandemic manifested differentially in our communities, depending upon race, income, or zip code. The opportunities to live, learn, succeed, and thrive here at Michigan and beyond squelched by generations of systemic racism. These are horrific reminders of how much more we need to do. And they are representations of the daily experiences of many in American society. Too many people in our communities are marginalized and devalued because of who they are. I'm committed to continuing the University of Michigan's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Initiative for years to come, beyond the initial 5-year strategic plan. It must continue, and we must persist with urgency. The effects of the pandemic have reduced our enrollment of underrepresented minorities. We must continue to move our campus and our work forward along with society and build on the accomplishments you've inspired, created, and enacted. Your advocacy and commitment are helping us to create a set of new campus anti-racism initiatives, which Provost Collins will discuss shortly. Among these, we've created a new scholarship in honor of George Floyd after U of M alumna Marshall Willian reached out to us, inspired by a challenge from North Central University President Scott Hagan. This need-based scholarship will give preference to students who participated in Wolverine Pathways, our college readiness program that serves students from Detroit, Southfield, and Ypsilanti community school districts, and who have demonstrated a commitment to bettering their communities. I know that many in our community have already made donations to support this scholarship. I encourage you to consider making a donation to this worthy effort. To do so, you can visit diversity.umich.edu. Your recognition of our need to promote academic success has led to the double-digit growth of our Success Connects holistic support program. It's open to all students and includes our first-generation students, students from low socioeconomic backgrounds, and underrepresented minority students. And last fall, more than 1,600 students from low-income families received a total of $19 million in institutional and federal support to cover the entire cost of tuition and fees through our Go Blue guarantee. There's one more opportunity we have to affect change and help determine the future we all want to see. It takes place a week from tomorrow on Tuesday, November the 3rd. Regardless of your political affiliation or ideology, you have the right and the opportunity to make your voice heard. Please register and vote on or before Election Day. If you're not a US citizen, you can become engaged and help your peers better understand issues. Those eligible to vote can register or turn in your absentee ballot right here on campus at our Museum of Art on State Street. And while the city clerk's satellite office in UMA is a literal representation of the intersection of democracy and the arts, today's community assembly allows us to explore this idea in a different way. The arts are a powerful vehicle for social change, and we see in them the power of our university community. I applaud all in our community who've expressed and advanced our commitment to justice and peace through the arts, given voice to marginalized individuals and communities, and brought us together to confront our most pressing issues. This includes the faculty, staff, and students of the U of M Arts Initiative and many other partners in this summit as well. Earlier this year, our country lost one of its great elected leaders and national heroes, Congressman John Lewis. As a 25-year-old, he led hundreds of nonviolent protesters across the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama, to call for voting rights in the state. Police beat him and fractured his skull. I had the opportunity and honor to meet and spend time with him 8 years ago when he came to Brown University to receive an honorary doctorate, and again in 2017 when he spoke in Hill Auditorium, invited as part of the Stamps School Distinguished Speaker Series. I will always remember his words. When we see something that is not right, that is not fair or just, he said, we have a mission, a mandate, and a moral obligation to stand up and speak out and find a way to get in the way. I want to thank all of you for ensuring that the University of Michigan's mission remains inseparable from diversity, equity, and inclusion, and for reinforcing through your actions, advocacy, protest, and persistence that we all have a moral obligation to live up to our values as a public university. Thank you. It's now my pleasure to introduce the University Provost, Susan Collins. Provost Collins.
Thank you very much, Mark. Good morning, everybody. I am just delighted to be with all of you here today, and I welcome this opportunity for us together to explore the many ways that the arts contribute to social change. This summit is an important annual occasion for our community. It prompts us to assess the progress that we have made towards our diversity goals, to mark that progress, and to identify areas that need focused attention. The summit also provides us with opportunities to consider new ideas and to learn from one another about how we can contribute to anti-racism work. When diversity strategic planning began in 2016, we recognized that our work is most effective when it builds on the strengths and the uniqueness of our many schools, programs, offices, and departments, and when it leverages their excellence to promote institution-wide change. This combination of local and campus-wide work has moved us forward in important ways, and now we are launching a set of anti-racism initiatives that will continue and enhance our ability to address structural inequities and systemic racism both on campus and in our society. These include a number of items, but to highlight, as President Schissel mentioned, we are establishing a George Floyd Memorial Scholarship Fund to provide need-based scholarships to students with a demonstrated commitment to bettering their community through social justice. We will hire at least 20 new full-time faculty members with scholarly expertise in racial inequality and structural racism in the next 3 years. We are also expanding resources and infrastructure to support university scholars working in the areas of anti-racism. And this includes the recent awarding of over $260,000 to 6 action-based research projects as part of the inaugural Confronting and Combating Racism grant program. We're creating a task force on policing and public safety for the Ann Arbor campus, and there will be an announcement about the process for nominations and self-nominations in the university record tomorrow morning. We're reevaluating race and ethnicity curriculum requirements across all of our 19 schools and colleges. We're strengthening faculty and staff professional development programs and opportunities related to anti-racism. We are also creating a task force to develop a community-engaged process for diversifying the names that we consider for campus spaces, facilities, and streets. And we're incorporating ways to address structural racism in the university's democracy and debate theme semester. These initiatives are key to making our campus a community in which each of us is valued and where everyone can thrive. They will also make important contributions to building an anti-racist society more broadly. It's my great pleasure, again, to thank all of you for joining us today, and I really look forward to our continuing work together in these and so many other areas. Now it is my pleasure to introduce Katrina Wade Golden, a Michigan alum who received her PhD at Wayne State University. Dr. Wade Golden is our Deputy Chief Diversity Officer as well as Director of Implementation for Campus-Wide Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Strategic Plan. Katrina, on to you.
Good morning to the University of Michigan community, and thank you, CDO Sellers, President Schlissel, and Provost Collins for your opening remarks. It is now my distinct pleasure today to introduce our first guest speaker, Johanna Kepler, who is a recent graduate of our very own School of Music, Theater, and Dance, where she majored in dance. Welcome, Johanna.
Hi, thank you so much. The power of a single story has always fascinated me, empowered me, and inspired me to create the art that I make every day. We all have a story, the intersectionality in our identity where the threads of our unique experiences meet to weave the fabric of our lives. In thinking about identity, I have always asked myself, how can we be our most authentic self? Can our singular presence in a given room be powerful enough to deconstruct systems of oppression that are deeply rooted in the US just because we show up? My name is Johanna Kepler, and I just graduated from the University of Michigan with a BFA in dance performance and a minor in Latino studies. I am an indigenous Maya, Guatemala, Jewish immigrant. During my 4 years at Michigan, I became deeply passionate about figuring out ways to connect my passion for the performing arts, specifically dance, with my social justice advocacy work, specifically racial justice and immigration reform. That passion stemmed from my own identity as a woman of color adopted into an unconventional household. I was adopted from Guatemala when I was a baby by 2 white lesbian mothers raised in a half-Jewish household. I also have a little sister adopted from Guatemala as well. I grew up in a white upper-class neighborhood where the people I saw on a day-to-day basis did not look like me. I had to learn how to be proud of my heritage, what it meant to be Latina, and constantly grapple with being raised in privileges that I was not born into. My birth mother signed my birth certificate with her fingerprint because she could not read or write her own name. The one thing she wished for me was a good education. Her story drives me forward every day. My sophomore year at school, I choreographed and directed a piece called Through Our Eyes. That was in response to the outward physical racist attacks on students of color springing up shortly after the presidential election on campus. I knew what it felt like to be a person of color on a predominantly white campus, but I also knew there was not just one narrative that defined every person of color on campus. I recognize I do not know what it is to be a young black male and have the N-word written on my name tag in West Quad. I do not know what it is to be a Muslim woman and have my hijab ripped off while walking back to my dorm in broad daylight on campus. But I also knew that many of my white classmates were not affected by this news in the same way that students of color were across campus. I saw many white students were complacent when it came to these conversations. I wanted to wake up the campus and have the racist attacks not be seen as isolated incidences, but a window into what students of color faced every day. Whether it be physical attacks, microaggressions, or the fact that unless we took specified classes, we did not learn from or learn about people that looked like us in our textbooks. I decided to use the most powerful tool I have to create human connection and empathy, the power of art and dance. I decided to put on stage what words had failed to express, something that touches people at their core. Through Our Eyes included myself and 7 other dancers of color in the dance department, as well as 2 vocal performance majors of color. Together in collaboration, we created a piece highlighting what students of color go through on a day-to-day basis through recorded audio, song, and dance. For the sound score, I interviewed 15 students of color about their experiences on UM campus, including a few of the most recent victims of the outward racist assaults that took place weeks earlier on our campus. In between the recorded interview testimonials from students, 2 vocal performance majors sang the Maya Angelou poem, Still I Rise. I directed the piece, and together we created the movement that spoke to the words from each interview and the melody of the vocals. We were then selected to perform the piece at the annual SMTD Collage event at Hill Auditorium. We performed the piece for 3,500 almost exclusively white students, alumni, faculty, and staff. When we finished, we got a standing ovation. For the first time, my cast and I felt that we had been heard. After the performance, multiple white students came up to us telling us that they had no idea what we were going through and thanked us for sharing our truths on stage. Every day, I am reminded that people that look like me and share my bloodline do not have the same opportunities that I have been given my whole life. When I turn on the news and see the migrant children in cages, I am not upset, I am enraged, because those children are my people. Same wide, brown Mayan eyes, same noses, same dark raven hair. I stare back into a mirror of myself. How can I turn away? But not everyone feels that way. It is easy to read a newspaper about horrible things happening in our world and not have that gut-wrenching reaction. We become numb. We have to survive. But what if you put that topic you read about in ink on stage? What if the words on the newspaper page were a song? What if they jumped off the page and danced for you, cried for you, screamed for you? Could you ignore it then? Someone once told me, if you cannot say it, write it. If you cannot write it, sing it. And if you cannot sing it, dance it. Another project I did during my time at Michigan stemmed from my immigration law class senior year. I became fascinated with asylum law. All of the history and stories of waves of immigration of people coming to the US, the personal narratives written up in asylum credible fear cases, fueled my passion for the power of the personal narrative even more. I decided to create a solo entitled Through the Eyes of My People that was about the current US-Mexico border crisis. I know that my body alone on stage makes a statement. The audience sees a woman of color and automatically makes assumptions, often without even realizing it. What is she? Mexican? Indian? I wonder if she speaks English. It is a natural human reaction. I believe there is so much power in the body and in movement. Without saying a word, I know my body alone makes a statement in space. Now we will see a short clip from the piece that I just referenced.
My name is Orbelina Melendez. I am 36 from Honduras. I watched as my husband was shot in front of the Honduran capital. I then received death threats. I have no police report. When you are poor, they do not investigate and it remains unpunished. That is why I left.
My name is Lindel Marroquin. I am 33 from La Ceiba, Honduras. I am a single mother with 5 daughters. I began the journey with my brother and 3 of his children. Now I only have 2 of my girls with me. In the chaos along the way, we became separated. My brother is somewhere with one of my daughters. With me, I have my daughter, Dariana, 5, and Sofia, 1. I don't know if they're ahead of me or behind me. I pray for them.
For this solo, I started by creating a sound score of about 15 interviews from credible fear asylum cases of migrants traveling to the US from Central America, taken from various news sources. Each story was about 30 seconds to a minute long. I then had each story read and recorded by a Latinx student to get a varied feel of the different voices. The movement was created not by acting out the story, but how the stories made me feel inside when I listened to each one. The body cannot lie. When one is fearful, they shrink, shoulders raised towards their ears, tailbone curls in towards the spine. When one is sad, shoulders slouch, eyes droop, and the body becomes weighted. I let my body express what it felt, and in doing so, the audience saw my most authentic self. The solo was then selected to represent at the American College Dance Festival Regional Eastern Conference. After performing, many students from universities across the country came up to me with tears in their eyes, admitting they had never felt the stories or cared about the crisis at the border in the way that I had expressed to them on stage. They were ready to join the fight. After my 4 years at Michigan began to come to a close, I realized that it was not just about the stories that I was drawn to, but creating the spaces for those stories to be shared. I had learned how to build spaces for other creatives of color to share their own stories and their own narratives in the most authentic way possible through their art. I had also learned how to become a platform for marginalized people of color to reclaim their own narratives, raise awareness on racial issues, and give those without a voice a platform to be heard. After graduating, I wanted to continue to elevate people of color and the power of the personal narratives. This past summer, I founded an interview series project called The Power of the Performing Arts, Uniting Artists Well Apart. This interview series project aims to raise awareness on how the COVID-19 pandemic is affecting performing artists in our communities, as well as continue to share the story of the artist during a time of social distance. I have interviewed over 200 artists worldwide, and with the help of other UM students, created a website platform in which we post each artist interview. We are also working on translating the website into Spanish to reach a larger demographic of people who are often not included in these conversations due to language barriers. Fast forward to now. I just moved to New York City. Yes, during a global pandemic. Every morning I wake up and walk 2 blocks to my left for coffee. Every morning on my way, I pass the Guatemalan Consul, a tall, dark cement building with a line of at least 100 Guatemalans outside at all times. I see their eyes shift to look at me above their masks as I pass by, waiting in line for immigration status and work visas. Every morning, I think to myself, that could have been me. Even though I do not know them or their stories drive me forward every day. I wonder each morning if anyone in that line is also an artist. Do they use their art to express their truth? My identity continues to influence the way I see the world around me. I want to continue to dedicate my life to making spaces in which people of color can represent themselves in the most authentic way possible. With more empathy building through art, I believe we can continue to make positive, tangible change towards a more equitable world that we want to live in. Thank you for listening to my story today.
Thank you so much, Johanna, for that very powerful contribution. Our next speaker is Colleen Medicine, who is the Director of Language and Culture of the Sault Ste. Marie Tribe of Chippewa Indians and a member of the Anishinaabe Theater Exchange. Welcome, Colleen.
Good morning. Ani, Buju, Mwapshke Sinikwe Indigenous, Saginaw and Donjaba, Bawating Dada, Dan Jabam Kak, Makanaminising, Mishiki and Dodem, Ojibwe Anishinaabe Kwe and Dao, Miigwech Wendam, Monda, and Akiing Nungwa. Good morning, everybody. My English name is Colleen Medicine. My spirit name is White Rock Woman. My heart first sounded in Saginaw, Michigan, where I was born. But now I live in Bawating, or Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan, in the Upper Peninsula. And my heart, my relatives, and my family come from Mackinac Island, Michigan. I am Turtle Clan and a citizen of the Sault Ste. Marie Tribe of Chippewa Indians, and I give thanks for what we are doing here today. I've been told to always introduce myself in our beautiful language so as to alert spirit to come and listen. I am so honored and humbled to be asked to take part in the 2020 DEI Summit, and I'm thankful for the opportunity to share some Anishinaabe history and some of the efforts taking place in and around our communities. This is very appropriate to me because the University of Michigan is on lands that are part of the traditional homelands of the Anishinaabe. Ga, Mampi, Da, Gia, Zanaba. Ga, Mampi, Da, Gia, Zanaba. I shouldn't be here. Let me explain. As a woman, and as a Native woman, as an Ojibwe and Anishinaabe woman, I shouldn't be here. See, the area that my people come from has had over 500 years of contact. And in addition to that, there were several federal Indian policies that were meant to stamp out and eradicate Native American people, including the Anishinaabe here in Michigan. Some of those policies include removal, assimilation, relocation, and allotment. And as a result of those policies, my ancestors experienced atrocities and indignities that have played out over time within our communities as loss of language, culture, and identity. Over time, we have made great efforts, though, to go back and search out some of the things that were lost, taken, and stolen without consent. In my work as the Director of Language and Culture for the Sault Ste. Marie Tribe of Chippewa Indians, I facilitate the repatriation of our ancestors, sacred objects, and objects of cultural patrimony, which were removed from our homelands without consent and are now sitting in museums, universities, institutions, and a lot of times in private collections. I assist with the reburial ceremony of my ancestors and those objects. My department also works hard to deliver Anishinaabemowin language opportunities as to restore and revitalize our language. We work hard to protect sacred sites and to provide many opportunities to learn teachings, culture, and ceremonies. We also work on rematriation of seeds, food sovereignty, and bringing back traditional crafting, art, and knowledge. Reclaiming identity is heavily rooted in artistic expression of culture. This can be seen at public gatherings. You may be more familiar with the term powwow. As there are 12 federally recognized tribes in the state of Michigan, you may have seen or heard of the word powwow or attended one across the state. Our communities are also speaking out in efforts to protect our precious ecological resources, such as our Great Lakes. We're also working hard to bring back traditional clothing and wear. And many of our ways are coming back, and our young people are actually picking up our old ways and our language that was left to us by our ancestors. So in addition to the work that I do here at the Sioux Tribe, I'm also part of the Anishinaabe Theater Exchange, which allows me to work in a different way to reclaim identity. The Theater Exchange was founded by Dr. Anita Gonzalez, the Associate Dean for Faculty Affairs at the University of Michigan, along with a group of students from the university and some Anishinaabe community members from local tribal communities in the Upper Peninsula. The Theater Exchange uses theater as the main vehicle of delivery to bring awareness and education to important issues that affect tribal communities. And some of those issues include trauma, loss, murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls, sexual assault, sexual violence, and violence against women, and many other issues. But the common theme centers on loss of culture and identity. The Theater Exchange has performed a handful of plays, including Sliver of a Full Moon, which was written by Mary Catherine Nagel. And this is a powerful piece about the reauthorization of VAWA, or the Violence Against Women's Act. We've performed The Fry-Bred Queen, which was written by Dr. Carolyn Dunn. And this piece is about loss as told through 3 generations of really powerful women. We've performed 50 Cents a Pound, which was written by Rebecca Podleski, and is about the struggle to protect and preserve fishing and treaty rights within local Anishinaabe communities. 3 Sisters, which was also written by Dr. Carolyn Dunn, and is about 3 estranged sisters who return to their homelands to make arrangements for their aunt's final journey. This was most recently performed in 2019 at the University of Michigan as part of a theater residency that the Exchange did with the Center for World Performance. And now I'd like to show a few pictures from those performances. So what I feel is most important about some of these pictures, you'll see some traditional clothing here. And so many times the individuals who are part of the exchange are wearing traditional clothing on stage to represent themselves and their identities. You can see a lot of that through these pictures. The exchange includes a lot of Anishinaabe people, but it also includes Native American people from across the country. And here we are in rehearsal. Great. So now I'd like to show you a small video clip that was produced by the Center for World Performance in and is about the theater exchange.
The Anishinaabe Theater Exchange formed because we were in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and we were trying to find ways to connect people to storytelling in the region.
Was thinking in the back of my mind about climate change and about really that phenomenon of missing and murdered Indigenous women is really just exploding.
When you're just telling a story, like speaking, it's not as exciting as if you get the visual aids. And so it allows us to like express issues and do it through storytelling, but also during theater. So it allows for that connection with the audience. So it means a whole lot to me to be able to be a woman, like, and express my identity as a Native woman on stage in front of people and be taken seriously. Because sometimes we're not, you know, as statistically speaking, we shouldn't even be here. We certainly shouldn't be here. So the fact that we get to be on stage and identify with each other as Native women, but also express like those issues, those really important issues that are not just affecting Indian country, but affecting Indian country at much higher rates.
Great, that's such a powerful video. And I'd like to acknowledge that beautiful song that is inside that video. It's called Manda Gijagat and performed by the Swamp Singers and written by Frank Bartley and translated into Anishinaabe-Moan by Howard Kimawan. So you may be wondering, what's next for the Theater Exchange? And I'm happy to announce that we have an exciting project coming up that will focus on storytelling using Anishinaabe-Moan language. Ga Mampi Da Gia Zanaba. Ga Mampi Da Gia Zanaba. I shouldn't be here. I shouldn't be here because there were several acts done to ensure that Native people and the Anishinaabe would not continue to exist well into the future. But we are here. We don't all look alike. We don't all sound alike. And we don't all share the same culture, language, and traditions, but we are still here, still trying to retrace the steps of our ancestors. It is an incredible honor to walk in the footsteps of the Gete Anishinaabeg, the ancestors, the ones who have come before me, and to continue to pave the way for generations to come after me. I continue to work hard to reclaim language, identity, and culture, and share with others what I know. I continue to do this through my work at the Sioux Tribe in the Language and Cultural Department, and through my participation with the Anishinaabe Theater Exchange. And now I'd like to leave you with this. Giabe gwa gda'a me. Giabe gwa gda'a me. We still remain. Miigwech Bazindamuk, thank you for listening. And now please enjoy a creative contribution from the UM community.
Thank you, Colleen. Following Colleen's presentation, you heard a jazz composition called Ain't I a Woman by Ellen Rowe, who's a faculty member in the music department. The image was a collage of the all-woman band that recorded this performance. Now, I'd like to welcome our next speaker back to campus, as she is an alum of U of M. Courtney Cogburn is an associate professor of social work at Columbia University. Welcome, Courtney.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be here. Let me just share my slides here.
Mike, look at me!
Leave that boy alone!
Black is always scary. He didn't do anything wrong! Black fireball, Mike.
You can't leave here dressed like that. That's against that.
I should have told you.
Sorry, didn't notice you. Just brush it off.
You have now become Mike Sterling. Look at yourself in the mirror.
So I've recently started working in virtual reality, thinking about ways to represent experiences of racism in an immersive manner. For much of my career, I've studied the lives of Black folks, not people of color, not diversity, and not in comparison to whites, but the lives of Black people and the ways in which they thrive in spite of. When I created A Thousand Cut Journey, I made a conscious decision to shift that focus and to, at least temporarily, hold whiteness accountable. I'm not here today to center Blackness in a discussion about racism and anti-racism, or to weave beautiful narratives of Black struggle, or to give you abstractions of diversity and inclusion. But as was the case with A Thousand Cut Journey, I'm here to hold whiteness accountable. When I created A Thousand Cut Journey, I made a conscious decision to target a white liberal audience. This was a response to the liberal tendency to intellectualize and pontificate about racism, to invest in symbols of equality without really sacrificing anything, without truly repairing anything, without actually investing in pathways to different possibilities. When I do this and I say this, people often ask me, well, aren't you preaching to the choir? And my response is yes, the choir has a lot of work to do. In his letter to white America, Dr. George Yancey states, I ask you to look deep, to look into your souls with silence, to quiet that voice that will speak to you of your white innocence. Take a deep breath. Make space for my voice in the deepest part of your psyche. Try to listen, to practice being silent. There's two arguments that I've followed in building and conducting this work. The first is that white people don't understand racism. And there's an asterisk here, sort of speaking to ways in which there's resistance, actively avoiding, etc. And for those of you who value empirical data more than generations of knowing that flows through my veins, you can see the citations for this below. The second argument I make is that we must understand a problem in order to solve a problem. And so this misunderstanding or lack of understanding and resistance among white people is a point of intervention for me. So that's the why. How about the what in terms of A Thousand Cut Journey? A Thousand Cut Journey places you into the digital shoes of a Black male character named Michael Sterling. And from his perspective, you experience racism across time and context, as a child being unfairly disciplined in a classroom, as an adolescent heading to a basketball game and being threatened by the police, and as an adult made to feel invisible and insignificant while applying for a job. But again, this is not a story of a Black man. This is a story of whiteness. Side note regarding the knowing in my veins. In one of the first interviews I gave about this work, before the piece was even finished, the journalist asked me, so the character's name is Michael Sterling. You combine the names of Mike Brown and Alton Sterling, correct? And I actually had to catch my breath before responding, no, it was just a name that came to me. And how do you tell a story like this when you're the mother of a young Black boy, when there is trauma and resentment in telling the story yet again in another way, hoping white people will understand? I told it with hope, imagination, an unwillingness to give up on possibility. I told this story with a sense of urgency, And I also told it with a team. I spent a lot of time with this team thinking about how do we create work through a transdisciplinary perspective? How can I leverage what I know and understand with the expertise and knowledge and knowing of others? It was important for me to not come to this table, to come to this team with an existing piece that I wanted them to implement, but instead come to them with a framework, an outline of what I thought was important. Some of what I decided at the outset was to think about ways in which these experiences of racism are always contrasted to whiteness. They're happening in the context of whiteness. So there were strategic ways that we thought about representing whiteness in every scene. It was also important for me that the work be empirically grounded. So in the first scene, when you're a small child sitting with blocks on the floor, and you're tossing and throwing the blocks along with other kids in the classroom, and then you're unfairly chastised by your white teacher who yells at you saying that you're being dangerous and you're going to hurt someone, is drawn from an empirical literature that has tracked disciplinary differences in the classroom on the basis of race. In the second scene, we have an encounter with the police where we have you, the user, get down on your knees and put your hands in the air as the police officers are yelling and cursing at you. You're just standing on the sidewalk speaking to a neighbor on your way to a basketball game. There's a moment in that scene where the lights go out and you hear you hear your mother's voice saying, just do what you have to do to get home alive. In that, we're capturing not only stop and frisk practices in New York City and the ways in which these types of stops often unfold, but we're also capturing the layers in which racism shows up in a life, the ways in which threats of whiteness have to be calculated on any given day. A mother's voice having to train her son at the very outset of his life that he needs to consider this threat and minimize the perceptions of his own threat so that he can survive and live to see another day. All of this is racism. A mother having to worry, a son having to diminish his own valid emotions and feelings in a moment where he's probably feeling terrified for the sake of survival in the face of whiteness. In the final scene of this experience, we have you in a workplace setting where you're applying for a job, and it's clear that you're not welcome here. It's subtle in the ways in which virtual reality can be quite powerful in conveying, ways in which stories told to you by friends and family may go dismissed, or you may provide alternative explanations for why that's happening. In this scene, it's very clear that your Blackness, in contrast to whiteness, is at play. And we want you to experience and feel that in your body, which is part of why virtual reality is so powerful. So I come back to this team. We can't do this kind of work without many voices and perspectives sitting at the same table. I often quote one of my Columbia colleagues who once told me that there are people who seek to solve the problems of their disciplines and others who seek to solve the problems of the world. I like to solve problems of the world, and I can't do that alone. We can't do that alone. So if you're part of this fight and you're part of this journey, I ask you, just as we asked in the trailer at the beginning, look at yourself in the mirror. An important component of this work is to think about how we actually achieve racial justice. And the way we achieve racial justice is not through an exercise that's intellectual or even in the consumption and production of science, but rather a visceral understanding that connects to spirit and body as much as reason. Thank you, and I'll now turn it back to Dr. Katrina Wade Golden.
Thank you so very much, Courtney, for that very powerful contribution. So now we've reached the time for our final speaker today, who is Wendell Pierce, an actor and musician. This year, we have the incredible delight to have him in our community as a digital residency artist at the University Musical Society. We're thrilled to welcome him to our community. Welcome, Wendell.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. This has been a very exciting and moving morning. The one thing that my 35-year career as an actor has taught me is to never follow up greater talent than yourself. And I have failed that this morning because with all of the participants of this summit, as on display by the deputy provost, the president, yourself, you then add to that the contributions of the speakers that have gone before, Johanna and Colleen and Courtney. I pale in comparison to the passion and intelligence and reflection that those women have expressed this morning, but I will do my best to make an impact on what we have come together to talk about this morning. Art as social change, the power of art as activism, art as a change agent. Our world has come to a halt. It's something that I've never experienced in my life. I've never seen anything like it, and most of you haven't either. It has come to a halt right at your ascent. For the community that I'm speaking to this morning, the young men and women who have come to school, whether it's your first or last year, the professors and all the administrators and all the leaders of the Michigan community, the University of Michigan community, you have been stifled right as you are trying to ascend, is the word that keeps coming to mind. And these have been prescient days that we won't soon forget, nor should you. Because it is in these difficult times, remember that crisis doesn't build character, but it reveals it. So use your art to reveal your character. Use your art to reveal your character. Even in the extreme circumstances, art always matters. In the American culture, we have turned away from the prophetic power of art. We have lost our way of the understanding of the role that art plays in our society. The role as a means of revealing the hidden order beneath the everydayness. Art has a prophetic power, and its power to transform us and the world is on display in its most difficult times. Art doesn't give us life's answers as much as the power to live life's questions. What thoughts are to the individual, art is to the community as a whole. It's the place where we reflect on who we are, where we've been, where we hope to go, where we reflect on our triumphs and our failures. It's the place where we decide what our values are and then act on them. What thoughts are to the individual, where we reflect on what we're going to do with our life. It is in that communal and community stage of art that we do the same for the society as a whole. It's art as activism. Art is a very tangible thing. It's not just ethereal. It's not just conceptual. Entertainment is just a byproduct of the work, of the art. Art as activism, intentional or not. Now, while laws prohibit people's behavior, art can change people's hearts and minds and humanity. Art as activism isn't reserved for the past. I say to the young people in this summit, art is not reserved for generations of the past. It's your generation that will make its mark as it answers this clarion call to speak truth today. In the midst of this pandemic, in the midst of this racial awakening, in the midst of these turbulent times, art always matters, and it is important because art can change people's humanity. What thoughts are to the individual, art is to the community as a whole. It's something that I've reflected on all my life. I am this middle-aged African-American man born and raised in New Orleans, the northernmost Caribbean city, the most swinging city in America. I love it. It is transformative. We live our culture, and culture is that place, that intersection between people and how they deal with life itself. That literal intersection is something that was explained to me and taught to me, not only in the experiences of growing up in New Orleans, but also one of my heroes, who is Albert Murray, who wrote The Omni Americans and Blues People. Please, as the intellectuals that you are, look him up, read his work. He teaches you the importance of art as social change and the importance of art as activism. You know, in New Orleans is the birthplace of jazz, and it was at Congo Square. It's hallowed ground where captured Africans reflected on their experience and created a music that is renowned around the world. Around the world. They found their creative freedom before they found their individual freedom. Captured and enslaved, they took the European brass music of their captors and that African six that they came there and danced and played the bambula, and they created the American aesthetic of jazz, this art form that has changed the world. Jazz. Jazz is reflected of the American aesthetic that we all hope that this more perfect union becomes, where the individual can be free and expressive, like a jazz solo interpretation and improvisation in the midst of confinement and reform laws, in this case, imprisonment and enslavement. They found their freedom. That is an American aesthetic that we have yet to achieve and that we challenge ourselves. It was there in that hallowed ground of Congo Square that not only did we create jazz, but the Haitians who had come from their own liberation 20 years before the Civil War of America, and they exchanged ideas with those captured Africans who were enslaved on plantations just outside of the city of New Orleans, and told them, rise up, create insurrection. So there was art as activism. In the midst of creating jazz, they also created insurrection. It was just years later from that same community where the Committee of Citizens in the late 1890s, post-Reconstruction, as Jim Crow laws come into effect in the Deep South, that they said, let's organize. And they put together the mission to attack and challenge Jim Crow laws in what became Plessy v. Ferguson. It came from Congo Square. Art as activism, this incubation of insurrection and activism and change agents. It was from that hallowed ground where those thoughts came. It was also with the creation of jazz that we created one of our great New Orleans heroes, Louis Armstrong, who showed you what music can do and demonstrate the democracy of what jazz was as an art form. It was Louis Armstrong who was seen by a young boy from Alabama, a young white boy from Alabama who had never seen the genius in the form of a Black man. His name was Justice Black, who ultimately left his Southern ideology and the KKK, which he had membership in, became a justice on the Supreme Court, and actually was a champion for civil liberties and civil rights. It was the impact of art as activism seen in Louis Armstrong. And it's that activism from New Orleans and where I'm from that I had a responsibility post-Katrina to come to my community and say, I have a responsibility to use my art as activism. I did Waiting for Godot, a play that demonstrates the void, the depression, the hopelessness of life after destruction like Katrina. And I did the play there in the lower Ninth Ward, where so many people had died. And as Beckett says in the place, at this place, in this moment of time, all mankind is us. Let us do something while we have the chance. Art as activism, as a change agent. So then it moved me to declare what my values are and to act on them. And I went back to my community of Pontchartrain Park. I organized the residents and we rebuilt our neighborhood, literally brick by brick, block by block, house by house. We rebuilt 40 houses so people can come back home with solar and geothermal systems in the midst of a disaster. And Pontchartrain Park was created during the Civil Rights Movement when Blacks couldn't just buy a home anywhere. And it was there that I took the lessons of the Moses generation and took it upon myself as a part of the Joshua generation to exercise my right of self-determination. And that is the power of art. That is the most important thing you must remember, that this is not just a piece of entertainment. This is a piece of activism, of change. Remember the "We Shall Overcome" and the civil rights songs that inspired people to continue on in the face of violence and even death, to continue on in their movement. It is with that clarion call that even the president had to say it from the podium of a joint session of Congress when LBJ, Lyndon B. Johnson, said, "We shall overcome." It was a moment where art moved the nation so that it can declare what its values are and to act on them, which then manifested itself in the civil rights legislation of the mid-60s. And so now that is what brings me here to Michigan. As a digital artist at the University Musical Society, we are in a quarantine doing a play called Some Old Black Man, which speaks to the insidious nature of racism, where a father and son have to deal with the history of their life and the conflict in that history, and realize that a part of it was created, that conflict was created by the insidious nature of racism that was also a part of the world around them and the history of their own personal lives. How racism not only affects us in our community, but it can affect us personally. So what I would like to leave with you now as I end my conversation is to exercise your right of self-determination and use art as social change and activism, because the template has been given to you before. Art is not entertainment. It's the place where we reflect on who we are, what our values are, and then to go out, answer that clarion call, and to act on those values. That is the power of art. And as a demonstration of that, now I would like to introduce another creative contribution from the University of Michigan artistic community. Thank you.
What has that man gone and done to me? What has that man gone and done to me? He left me in a
Thank you, Wendell, for that wonderful contribution and that call to action. Wendell's presentation was followed by a dance production called A Repetitious Narrative by Brooke Taylor and Mariah Stevens, undergraduate students in the School of Music, Theater, and Dance. You can view this piece along with all the other creative contributions on our summit website. And now, I'd like to welcome our discussion moderator, Aaron Dworkin, former dean of the School of Music, Theater, and Dance, where he is a current professor of arts, leadership, and entrepreneurship. Welcome, Aaron.
Thank you so much, Katrina. This has just been truly amazing. I am so moved and inspired by all of the incredible presentations by our wonderful speakers, and would now love to welcome all of them back. so that we can engage in a discussion about these issues. And I would encourage all of you, as I'm posing questions, feel free to hop into any of our panelists. Feel free to hop in, even if I don't direct the question directly to you. I'd like to kind of really see if we can build a dialogue about some of these issues. And I was really just extraordinarily moved. So I thought I'd start. Wendell, you just, shared and you spoke so powerfully about this importance of art in our society, especially art as activism. And what I was wondering is that we can kind of talk about these things, but that it is often difficult for artists to then get our stories out to the public. There are those who control often the levers of power, right? Those who are determining the jobs, who's getting the jobs, who can greenlight projects, who's determining directors, lead actors, et cetera. I was wondering if you could speak to, what do you think about how can we best affect those powers that be so that more of these extraordinary stories can actually reach the masses?
Thank you. That's always difficult to make sure that you have access and that you are, for all intents and purposes, you are sponsored or you have the money or you have the budget to get it out there. But there are too many examples of artists throughout history, recent history, that just go out and do it with the little means that they have. I'm sure Colleen can tell you that they are struggling with always getting funding for their theater, but I'm sure that their theater is still very impactful. It's impactful not only to the Native community that it comes from, it's impactful for those people who who receive it, who are not from the community. It teaches us all. The more specific you are, the more universal your story becomes, the more universal your work becomes. So Colleen speaks to all of us. The more she tells the truthfulness of her experience and their community's experience. So you have Peter Hall, who would go to the midst of the Sahara Desert and just put down a mat, and they would, in the open spaces, reflective of how they would just go to a village in the middle of barrenness and just do their plays. I came from New Orleans, as I said. Free Southern Theater was a theater group that went out during the Civil Rights Movement to inspire the marchers of the Civil Rights Movement, and they just would pitch a tent and do their plays. They did Waiting for Godot in the Mississippi Delta, in the middle of the cotton fields for sharecroppers. And it spoke to them because Waiting for Godot, the story of this void where you're waiting for an entity to come. At intermission, one of the sharecroppers, this, elderly Black man turned to the director and said, "He ain't coming." I've seen this before. Now, something that came from Nazi occupation, as Beckett was hidden during all of those years and wrote Waiting for Godot, became a classic because it speaks to the humanity of an elderly Black man in Mississippi in the 1960s. And it spoke to the people of Bosnia as they were in the midst of a civil war, spoke to the people of New Orleans as we did it post-Katrina, because it speaks to their humanity. So I say that you always fight for help to get your work out there, but at the same time, don't let your limited resources stop you from doing what you want to do. I also want to put out there that there is something like the Black Seed, which was just announced to help Black theater across this country. It's a $10 million project that came out of the Mellon Foundation, distributed from a Black theater in New York called the Billie Holiday Theater, which, along with the Plowshares here in Detroit, are actually funding projects. Anyone on this call should start to put in their RFP to get some of those seeds of money. So on both hands, you have it. There are those who are putting the money out there and those who just need to get out and start doing their work.
Awesome, awesome. And that is so true. And everyone should be watching, and especially students, if you have a project. I was an undergraduate student and had that initial idea for the Sphinx organization, and some of the core resources came directly from the university itself. not only funding, but also, of course, support from faculty. So we just have such an enormous network of resources here at the university. I encourage you to tap into those. So Wendell, you mentioned Colleen, and Colleen, I was gonna kind of ask you, because you spoke so beautifully about culture and identity. And what I was wondering is, right, this pragmatic reality that unfortunately there's a significant part of our country, percentage of our country, who are like, you know what, I like my culture, and I feel like my culture is the dominant culture, and I don't really want to learn about other cultures and those types of things. What I'm wondering is, how do you feel, or how would you suggest or guide us to, how do we respond to people who seem to have that viewpoint now? How can we ideally open their minds more, and or for those who may control people on school boards and others who are in large part controlling what identities and what cultures the young people in our society learn about? How can we speak to them? How can we convince them? How can we make the value proposition to them about the importance of all of the cultures and identities that make up who we are?
Yeah, thank you, Aaron. That's a great question. So one of the things I think I tell my team all the time is we don't ever change the end goal. And the end goal is always education and awareness of these important issues. We might have to change the route that we get there. And I always compare it to being much like water, right? Water is really powerful. Water is really fierce. It finds a way to go over something, under something, through something, around something. So I compare us to that. I say to my team and also to the other actors and actresses in the exchange, you know, the end goal is always the education. We know that we're underrepresented. We know that these issues are going on and they're not getting out there. We know that our education system, I can't speak to other states. I know in Michigan kind of lacks that true Native American history. We know that that happens here. And so the end goal is always to get education and awareness to the communities, and not just, you know, our Native community, but all of the people in our communities, because this is so important. And we do live in a state with 12 federally recognized tribes, and at least 2 state historic tribes. And so we have a state that's heavily populated with Native people. And so these issues don't go away. And so I don't get discouraged. I don't kind of backtrack. It's always, this is the end goal and how are we going to get there? And so I guess my advice is that, you know, you don't change the end goal, you change your route to get there. And we keep pushing forward, because even if we can impact one person, we can educate one person, maybe they'll educate another person, and so on. And so we're just most thankful to just be able to share that with at least one person, because we know that's important.
Oli, I love that viewpoint, because sometimes, and I know especially students will talk to me and say, oh, well, you know, if I'm just doing this, or I'm just talking to one person, that ripple effect that you're describing can absolutely become ultimately a tsunami. So I think that's amazing. Courtney, you know, this I have to share a little bit. It spoke to me very strongly, and especially utilizing this medium of virtual reality. But when you were talking about kind of capturing this in virtuality, especially for what happens for a young child, literally somehow watching that brought me right back to when I was in 5th grade. And unfortunately, we were throwing, you know, paper in class, and this was back with paddling. And so our teacher brought 5 of us out into the hallway. I was the only Black student in class. And when she came to me, she was giving us each one paddle. She leaned down and she whispered in my ear, "I wish I could give you more." Mm-hmm. And that's, of course, has stuck with me all of these years, but that ability somehow to bring people into a place of what other people experience, I think is powerful. But I wanted to kind of ask you about, you talked about how you really like to focus on, if you will, you know, liberal white people, and people say, you know, preaching to the choir, but the choir's got a lot of work to do. I have kind of a 2-part question, and then wondering if other people wanted to add in based on your response. But do you worry about alienating those who might be our strongest allies for some of these issues, kind of that? And then also, what about the conservative viewpoints that are so distant from where we are or these issues? And what about kind of convincing them? Just wondering if you could kind of speak to some of those.
No, I'm not worried about alienating people. I think that we don't have time to be sugarcoating this for folks. And so either your beliefs and behaviors align or they don't. And so I see myself as, trying to hold up a mirror where I feel like white liberal people for too long have invested in the language and symbols of their values, but their behavior has been inconsistent. And that's just no longer sufficient. And so, sure, I could be engaging a whole range of people around these issues. But if more of the group I'm targeting were actually doing the work of anti-racism and investing in meaningful practice in that regard, we would be much further along than we are right now. So I think it's not inconsequential to think about how to target and address this group. We're talking about white people who believe firmly in racial justice and racial equity, who support the arts of all sorts, right? Who are at the rallies and marches, and who consistently still miss the mark in either their depth and complexity or in understanding what racism actually is and how it functions in society. And so that's part of my work, right? That's who I'm engaging. And just quickly to your story, Aaron, it's always so moving to me when that happens, and it happens quite often, and it represents a tension for me where I designed this for a particular audience, but clearly Black people put on this headset, right? Clearly Black people engage in this work, and I've had to struggle with what effect do I have on them when I'm putting them into this experience. And just quickly, one story, a Black man, the first time we were demoing the piece as a Black colleague here at Columbia, put on the headset, we forgot to tell him about the policing. Now, every Black man I know has had an encounter, if not violent encounter, with the police, and we forgot to tell him that. And he lifted the headset when he got to that scene. He almost stopped, he almost took it off. He finished, and when I talked to him later, he said, I couldn't hear what the officers were saying, and I was afraid of what was going to happen if I didn't follow instructions. So, what we do to Black people versus what we're doing to white people in this piece sort of represents multiple tensions for me. But regardless, a white liberal audience, I think, is a meaningful and compelling group to address.
Yeah. And one quick kind of follow up to that, to you, Courtney, or to anyone on of our speakers, my question relates to how we can define a field. Can we say, for example, this field is racist, right? So for example, in the orchestral world, less than 1% of all of the works performed by all American orchestras are by any composer of color. That's just one of the measures that we know currently as of today. Can we from that say this field, as it relates to that, is racist? In other words, when we take these measures and we see this stark lack of inclusion, can we conclude from that the field is racist, or how should we approach that? And Courtney or anyone else who'd like to jump in.
It's very interesting that you said that, Aaron. I'm on this panel with these young women, and I'm, as you can see, a middle-aged man. I'm becoming impatient. I don't care. I don't care if I have to explain to you if something is racist. I don't care about trying to define and explain and educate. This world should be very thankful for Joanna and Colleen and Courtney, that they are trying to make that attempt to change and explain and open your eyes to the biases and all. Right now, I don't have time to change your bigotry. I got fewer days. I got more days behind me than in front of me. Mm-hmm. And so I appreciate their work even more. I'm not here to change your bias or make you understand or educate. I'm just here to tear down the infrastructure that allows you to perpetuate this bad behavior. And so in the work that I'm doing right now, I'm with a group called Black Theater United. We're having summits with the Lord Theaters, and we're having summits with the Broadway League. I'm getting to a document of actionable items. So while others can have that conversation, and I think it's a twofold thing. I think we need to do the work that you're doing and define and get the analytics to know and the empirical data of whether this is racist and understand where it's coming from and how it's built up and how the behaviors happened over time. I'm at the place where you figure that out on your own. Let's tear down this infrastructure to make sure it doesn't give you a platform to then take those biases and manifest them in bad behavior that has an adverse effect on my community and my opportunity to do my work.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much for that, Wendell. Johanna, you know, again, so also the work you are doing is just so phenomenal, and I've just felt blessed to have been able to participate in your series, and just your work is really fantastic. But so in a lot of, right, these art forms, do you feel like there are a lot of these historical precedents of whose work is performed, and that sometimes people equate that with artistic excellence, right? So in classical music, that might be the standard Western, you know, European repertoire or whatever. In dance, do you find that, you know, there's forms of dance or standard choreographers that are considered, this is what you're supposed to do? What do you say to people who kind of want to stay in those narrow lanes that have that historical precedent versus exploring some of this new work and obviously things as powerful as asylum stories? What do you say to people who want to just stay in what they've known?
Yes, absolutely. That's such a great question and a great point. I would say that Western forms of art, specifically in dance, ballet is definitely held on this pedestal that's very different than contemporary and modern dance. And I think more and more choreographers, specifically choreographers of color, are trying to reclaim their narratives through art and use the African diaspora, the Latin diaspora more to really talk about who they are on stage. And I think it's not just a question of kind of what art is being made by people of color, but also the education and the access to the art. So who are our audiences? How do we get people of color in the door? A really good example, I think, is when I talk about these asylum works, a lot of it is in English, but a lot of it's also in Spanish. And so why would an immigrant mother with children who have come to this country want to go see an opera in a language that she doesn't necessarily understand and really can't relate to? And so I think it's also just about kind of the access, the community engagement, and just kind of highlighting the narratives of people of color more and more.
So much for that. So unfortunately, we're running short on time, but one quick kind of last question I wanted to put out, and whoever would like to respond. President Schlissel shared about John Lewis's comments about getting in the way, right? And so I think there are so many students, faculty, staff who've been inspired by your presentations, but coming out of it might not know exactly, okay, I want to do something. I want to get in the way, but I'm not exactly sure where I should start. What is that first step I should take? Does anyone have just suggestions, or what would you say to that person who's been moved about what should they do now?
As the old man speaks, I just want to say, first of all, especially for young people, know that you are not alone and you're probably not the first. You do not have to reinvent the wheel. You know, I saw Johanna's work and I immediately thought of Jose Limon, one of the great Latin choreographers that is just really wonderful. I have a friend that Colleen probably knows, Jacqueline Keller, who does the work of indigenous people. I met her in Portland, but she's all over and doing the work. There is the Black Arts movement that was there ahead of us that were being innovative and doing innovative things. One of the experimental filmmakers, William Greaves, comes to mind when I look at Courtney's work. So I tell those young people that to know that what they're feeling is correct, to know that they feel that urgency of now, carpe diem, is correct, and know that they are not alone. And there's probably an example in our history that gives us a pathway and gives us a blueprint. I tell the protest movement all the time, don't think you're feeling this for the first time. Young people always tell us, man, you don't understand. Guess what? We do understand. Not only did we have an understanding, but we also came up with some blueprints and some ways to move the needle And so I hand the baton to you to say, move the needle even more and push this even more. We're not going to get to an endpoint. This sort of work is a continuum. See it as a chronic disease where you're constantly vigilant about what you need to do. So assume that there's someone out there who's done it before and seek them out so that you can then take on the mantle and move the needle forward.
Awesome. Thank you so much to all of our extraordinary speakers and presenters today. And just wanted to close, there was a moment years ago when a Sphinx laureate was performing in Atlanta at a philanthropy conference, and Coretta Scott King was there. And she spoke to me about the importance of the arts and the civil rights movement. You know, her and Martin Luther King met at a music school, the New England Conservatory of Music. And so I just wanted to leave everyone with this quote from Martin Luther King, which is that change does not roll in on the wheels of inevitability, but comes through continuous struggle. And history will have to record that the greatest tragedy of this period was not the strident clamor of the bad people, but the appalling silence of the good people. Our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter. And I know from all of our extraordinary speakers today, we know that this intersection of the arts and social justice matters. Thank you all so much for joining us, and I'll toss it back to Rob here, who I believe will conclude our session. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Aaron, and I really want to thank our distinguished panel of speakers. The presentations and the conversations were truly invigorating, insightful, and just plain powerful. Please, I hope everyone will join me in giving them a hand. I invite you to continue the conversation on our summit website at deisummit.umich.edu, where we'll post this morning's a recording of this morning's event, and where the speakers will also respond to questions that we didn't get to this morning. This year, I'm also pleased to announce an innovative opportunity for students to carry forward the momentum of building the world that they want to see through a semester-long design challenge entitled Envisioning an Anti-Racist World. This design challenge is brought to you by the Presidential Arts Initiative, the Center for Academic Innovation's Extended Reality Initiative, the Center for Social Engaged Design, and the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. Please again visit our Summit events page for the details on the first info session that'll occur on November 9th. Also on the website, you can view a visual collage of images capturing some of the progress that's been made by our individual units across our campus during year 4 of our DEI strategic plan. And if you'd like to take a broader look and track all of the progress that's been made on each of the more than 2,300 year 4 DEI strategic plan initiatives, please go to diversity.umich.edu and check out the year 4 DEI strategic plan report. This report is extremely important. It represents one of the ways that we hold ourselves accountable and one of the ways in which we are transparent to our broader community with regards to the progress that we've made, and perhaps even more importantly, the progress that still needs to be made. I also want to take this time to bring to your attention the Democracy and Debate Theme Semester event that will be happening today at 4 p.m. It's entitled Music for Our Times and a Time for Our Music. Very, very similar to our discussions today. It's a discussion about music and social justice with 4 extraordinary people who've dedicated their careers to the power of music to make change. Check out the DEI Summit events page, deisummit.umich.edu, or the Democracy and Debate website for more information. And finally, I want to take this time to thank everyone involved in making today's event possible. including those who submitted their creative contributions and the artist profiles for a summit website. Please join me in thanking them. It takes a lot of hard work and dedication to do all the things that goes into a production like this. It takes even more effort to do so under the current circumstances with regards to our pandemic. To all of you who have played a part in putting this wonderful production on, you have my heartfelt appreciation and gratitude. And now, I cannot leave without also again acknowledging the great talent that has been on display this morning from our community here at the University of Michigan. Just outstanding. Thank you. We leave you with a song by Michael Turner, who's a program director of the Michigan College Advising Corps in the Center for Educational Outreach. The song is entitled Let Your Light Shine. The song features Urban Strings, a Detroit nonprofit youth arts organization, and the accompanying artwork is the cover illustration of a children's book by 3 graduate students in the School of Social Work, Emily Koo, Joyce Y. Lee, and Maggie Chen. I want to thank you all for attending and wish you a glorious and safe day. And please, please, please do not forget to vote, whether it's today, tomorrow, but make sure you vote by November 3rd. Thank you all and have a wonderful day.
This world will clarity.